Thank you for joining us tonight on another episode of Breaking Reality. I'm your host, Joshua McGuire, and with us tonight we have Gene Kahler with us once again. Welcome back, Gene. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good, fighting the weather. We're getting plenty of rain. At one point, it's too much rain, not enough rain. The weather's never bad. It's really just our way of thinking. That's all.
Exactly. So tonight we are going to be discussing consciousness once again. We're going to go deeper into this conversation. We touched on it the last show, and we went over a lot of different things in the last show. But I think tonight we're going to go a little bit deeper.
Okay. Yep. I'm prepared. Well, let's talk a little bit about consciousness and what is it? Unconscious, consciousness, spirituality. What and how does it tie into consciousness? So let's take a little ride on the merry-go-round a little bit, because as it seems, as we talk to people, everybody wants to awaken, and everybody's looking into their consciousness, and there's a lot of talk about it. But what is consciousness? And so I did a little bit of thinking about that, and I started looking for some analogies with it, and there's a lot of people that's talked about consciousness, and I thought, well, let me throw a little bit of my spin on it, and I really do agree with some of the other names that are out there that have been exploring this. Sadhguru, there's many of them. Wilcox, there's a bunch of people that's really dove deep into this, a whole lot smarter than me. I'm sure of it. But consciousness, as an example, let's think about that. Everybody knows that how you got somewhere with you and a person. Say you got in the car and you went to drive somewhere, and it was an hour drive, and it was like 2 minutes later, man, you're there, and everything's just, wow, that was a really short trip. You were jabbering back and forth. We've all done it.
Right.
So let's look at that and really what happened. Two people get in a car, two friends, and I look at it as a flashlight and a spotlight. Flashlight that has a focused beam, and then our subconscious, it's spotlight. I'm sorry, not spotlight, floodlight. So we got a spotlight and a floodlight. Two people get in a car, then you take off. And when you're focused, you're in traffic, and the other person isn't distracting you. You're focused on this, you focus on that, you focus on this, you're conscious, you're focusing, but what it really is, it's a flashlight. It's a beam. It's
right.
On, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, and you focus on, off. So it's that focused beam flashlight. Now, that subconscious part, or subconscious consciousness, is that, to me, it's like the floodlight that shines all. And here's a little bit of an example if you think about this. Back to the two people that are in the car. They get driving down the road, they get talking, and pretty soon, your spotlight on and off, because you're focused. Now all of a sudden, you start to drift and you're talking to the other person more. You're getting into that conversation. Now your spotlight isn't so much on the road flashing. Now it's to that person momentarily. But after a little bit of time, you'll find this out. And pretty soon, that you're all of a sudden driving the car, but you're really not driving the car. You're more focused on that person and that conversation. What's driving that car? You get there, you're unscathed, you're not hurt, everything's fine. It only took a couple minutes and it was an hour drive, but boom, you're all of a sudden there. Well, that was that floodlight that got you there. That was your subconscious, right. That conscious part that was really driving you there while you had your spotlight focused on your passenger. So there's a little example of consciousness, unconsciousness, and the way it works, where that it's happened to everybody, where your subconscious will actually take over. And it got you to that place without you really having to think about it. And that's kind of a little bit of analogy that I like to use that I put together and heard through other people over the years, and it's always held dear to me on a way to explain that. And as there's a really good book by Dr. Robert Joseph Murphy called "The Power of the Subconscious Mind," and it comes back from the 70s and 80s, and that's some of my early studies. But that consciousness part is really the subconscious, maybe you could say, because it's doing more for us than what our waking mind really is. We think we got it all under control.
Oh yeah.
What do you think's making that heart beat? The lungs breathe. It's all that subconscious making all that blood flow and all them neurons fire in that gland of ours.
Yeah,
So
the subconscious is really what controls everything. It keeps everything going. It keeps everything flowing. It's going at all times, no matter, even when you're asleep and you're in that state of quote unquote unconsciousness, the subconscious is still operating.
But what it makes me wonder is what part of the gland is activated in that subconscious part. What is it? What is the key to the what is the combination to them tumblers that gets us into that subconscious part for altering really anything that we do, altering even your own reality. So that subconscious part, that's also the area where all this manifestation everybody wants to do and see pots of gold sitting all over the place. It works in that type of way, but not just in the way that most people think.
Right.
One of the other keys to that consciousness is belief when it comes to manifestation. You have to believe, and the first time you waver on that belief, all that believing, and it goes really right out the door, because you got to start all over. Just wavering on that belief, just that 1 millisecond, gets you to the point where you need to start over. And there again, that's back into the subconscious, and instilling that into your mind that that's the way it is going to be, and that's the way that it is. And you accept nothing else but that. But I get into manifestation and all kinds of other stuff. Keep me on course, please. So
well, I mean, honestly, talking about manifestation and stuff is talking about consciousness still. I mean, consciousness is a key part of that, and like you're saying, what you're talking about with belief is what some people may also call faith.
Exactly.
And if that faith wavers, and you think you say you're sitting there trying to manifest, a lot of people look at the law of attraction and manifestation and they think finances. So let's use that as an example.
Give me the lottery numbers.
Exactly. Or someone doing something as simple as saying, "Hey, I just need to manifest enough money to pay the bills this month, to keep the electric on, the rent going." But they start to doubt, I don't think this is going to work. This isn't going to work. I'm going to end up getting evicted, or my electric's going to get shut off, or something, whatever that is. When that faith wavers, then it's like you said, it's a reset button, and all that you just got to start all over again.
Yeah. And it's really instilled in that consciousness to believe a certain way and not to waver on the belief. And I guess that's where them ceremonies become so important, but there again, the spirituality part and the altered state, the vibration of the pineal gland, and that consciousness that we strive to get to for the spirituality. But one thing that I'm having trouble with, consciousness and vibration. And I'm not getting the two together. I understand, but I'm the correlation in between them. How is, and that's something. I guess that's the $1 million question. But it's just something that I'm bewildered on how the vibration and how we can change our vibration here on Earth. I guess it's what it really amounts to. It's a different frequency is what we're on. We're on a frequency here, and we have a whole bunch of different vibrations.
Right.
There, on the other side, we are in a different frequency, and there again, we have a whole list of vibrations to go through. And that's kind of how I'm starting to see it and put it together. It's not like it's coming to me mathematically in the way of what people understand here, but it comes to me in a mathematical way during ceremony through vision and feeling to see and understand this.
Right.
And believe me, I'll take the rest of my life trying too.
I
Nobody
think
has all the answers.
I think part of what's happening is when we start tuning into certain frequencies and vibrations, and you see it if you go and you look at, some of the shamanic practices of different tribes where they do rhythmic drumming or they do rhythmic dances and stuff. What they're doing is they are getting their body into a state where they're entering into a certain vibrational field by what they're doing.
They're altering that consciousness
Right.
From this state to another.
And there's shamans that will use these techniques without plant medicines to enter into the same realms that we will enter into using plant medicines. But you also see it used when using plant medicines when you look at the curanderos down in Peru with the Icaros that they sing and the rattles that they'll use during ceremony. That's bringing a vibration in that's affecting that consciousness while you are in that state.
Yeah, I use a lot of tribal music, with drums, flutes, if it's any chanting. And I believe that affects that state of consciousness that we're alluring to while we go through ceremony. And that altered state of consciousness, gets many of us the answers. I'm always tickled about, how people's lives change and the truth that they get, because there's nothing other there than the truth. And no matter what I do, so they could be mad at me all they want. I think it's funny, but you got what you needed, and there's the truth, and I've done my job.
Yeah.
In that state of consciousness, though, a lot goes on, obviously, from programming our everyday lives, and actually whatever we manifest during them subconscious moments, we're also manifesting for others, or altering their manifestations in some way or form. Nothing's done without a reaction in this realm. Nothing. Everything makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Yes, and there's a lot of different paths that can be altered through the subconscious and or consciousness areas that we go to. There's been a lot of study over the years of consciousness and the sacraments that we use, and then they're finding out more and more leaps and bounds every day over it. And the consciousness state too, and it really touches on the spirituality, religious factors that are very heavy tones, and it always makes me wonder why so many have the same similar occurrences during ceremony. I mean, there's hundreds of them, and it's been happening for thousands of years, so there's many occurrences and stories about consciousness through the altered states that we strive to. And yet so many of them are the same. So
I was going to say you've seen
that is making this the same.
I mean, you've seen that in Rick Strassman's book, the DMT, the spirit molecule, where he done his studies with DMT, and so many of the people that underwent the process with the DMT came back with almost the exact same experiences, just slightly different, but almost identical experiences.
There's many different levels and realms with the use of those sacraments. Um, and it takes a while to climb the ladder, a sort to say. Um, but there is a lot of wisdom and knowledge that can be grasped there in that altered consciousness state. Um, there again, and that's the active ingredient with ayahuasca, it just gives you a lot more time to work while you're there. And that state of consciousness, if people, you know, when you sit down for your first cup of tea, you know, you're in the WTF club for a little bit there. And, you know, and once you've come to church a few times and you start to understand and let the plant medicine work, let the spirits talk, then you start to understand more and you can get more while you're in ceremony. It does nothing but gets better. So that consciousness, now there's many people, they tell me they get to the same place with nothing. Hey, if you are, great. Then think of this. If you get there now, then with sacraments, then think where you'd be, if you could even imagine that. So that usually gets some people thinking a little bit. Yeah, oh, you think you've reached the top? Maybe you have, but I highly doubt it. I really believe that the sacraments are needed to vibrate that pineal gland at the rate and frequency needed to go and transform and take a peek on the other side, behind the curtain.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, every shamanic culture in the world has some kind of plant medicine that they use to enter into other states, to enter into altered states. Every shamanic that I've seen,
All of
I if there's one out there that doesn't use some kind of plant medicine to enter into an altered state during, you know, a shamanic journey, I know you can go into shamanic journeys without it, like we talked about, through rhythmic movement, meditation,
complete darkness even.
yeah, complete darkness.
300 hours.
Yeah.
And tryptamine starts to release.
And you know, there's holotropic breathing and stuff that you can use to kind of enter into some of those states and stuff as well. But to really get in there, it's those plant medicines. You know, those are the real earth movers. They shake the earth underneath your feet and take you to places that you've never thought about going ever before.
Well, and see, with PTSD, anxiety, and thank you, I don't have none of them issues. That I work with many, many people, and my heart goes out to them. But what I'm seeing is here in this 3D world, in this state of consciousness, there is a handful of pills. Take that.
Yeah.
So in this altered state of this state of consciousness that we're in, hey, them pills really help a lot of people, and we're blessed to have them if they're needed. Right. However, I warn people of the side effects like everything else. And if you can get through life without them, try to do so, or look at other means of maybe alleviating those symptoms that you have of PTSD and anxiety. And ayahuasca's proven already. I mean, the science is out on how that helps. But see, my belief is that PTSD, I know this really for a fact, and I don't have no big scientific studies, but the PTSD, anxiety, and that, you know, you can mask it with all the Valium and Xanax you want out here, but the one place to go fix it, there's where I take you.
I can attest to that.
Consciousness. That's where the PTSD hides. That's where your depression lays and seeks you out throughout the day. That's where it's hiding. You go there with me, and then that we can alleviate it because we take the demons on head on.
Oh yeah, and I can attest to it. I have dealt with depression and anxiety and PTSD myself. And you know, I went through years and years of, you know, going and seeing a counselor and seeing a psychiatrist and taking all the pills they wanted to give me, and none of those pills fixed or cured anything. They alleviated some symptoms, but also at the same time, I just felt like a zombie. I didn't care. You know, the pills just numbed me out to the point to where I didn't care. when
Liquid
I,
lobotomy.
yeah, exactly. It was a lobotomy and a pill. You know, take this capsule, and that's it. You're just numbed out. It
The relief is out there, and then, but you have to fix it in another, like I said, another state of consciousness, and it isn't this one. Take all the medication you want. Now, there again, if there's medication that needs to keep a certain chemical within the brain
right.
stabilized, by all, do so. I'd never go against the doctor, and I've seen it
Absolutely.
work for many people. I've seen there's some real good medications out there. Unfortunately, you have to go through a few, and my heart goes out to people who go through that. However, with plant medicine and the time, now you can't come down and sit in one ceremony and think, "Oh, it didn't work for me," and then you go see your shrink for week after week for years and years, taking all them pills, giving them all this money, and you're in the same boat you were the year before, year before, year before. Why
I
wouldn't you
can
try
attest to
something
that.
different? You know, but it's a different state of consciousness, and it goes back to that. That's where the work's got to get done. There's where things get fixed.
Right.
There's where things get brought out of the closet in that state of consciousness, and that's how I fix stuff here. And it's done through prayer, meditative prayer before ceremony, and it's changing that state of consciousness to where it can be taken on face forward. And yeah, the first ceremony is a little rough on people, but after that, just think all the knowledge, wisdom, and love that follows. There is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but see, that people got to come and see for themselves. I'm not going to seek out and give people the end of the story. You're going to come and read the book yourself.
No spoilers.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to give you the end chapter. I'm the one that's been seeking that for the last 30 years. It's
Absolutely.
there. Hmm.
And I want to go back to talking about what you was talking about with depression and anxiety, because I've got experience
Yeah,
with it, and I've got experience
yeah,
of taking the medications that were prescribed to me by doctors, and then I have experience with using plant medicines as
yeah.
a process of healing through it.
Hmm.
And it was the the really first plant medicine that I started to heal with the anxiety and depression was psilocybin.
Yeah, oh, beautiful plant medicine. Psilocybin works very well. It just, when I'm ready to get people to a certain place, I control the sacrament ayahuasca better, and for reasons that I can't talk about on here, with
Right.
my NDA and stuff. But I control things very, very good with that because of how it's produced, and I know exactly to the drop of what's there, so
Hmm.
I can tailor that ceremony for what the person needs. There's a starter ceremony, um, but I there again, that's why I talk to the people. We go over medications, we go over issues in life, and what it is they seek, and then I send the prayer myself for what I need for them, and that's how I turn the old key in the lock for them.
Right.
So, uh, but I do agree with you. Psilocybin is a real good. I'm glad it worked for you. Also,
Well, psilocybin was a starter, but it
yeah,
was. I will tell you that where the real work was done was once I started working with ayahuasca.
yeah,
And ayahuasca has just there's I love psilocybin. I think psilocybin is a great plant medicine. It's got some very, very powerful uses to it.
hmm,
um I 100% can, I support the usage of psilocybin, but if you really want to get down, get serious, and get into doing that shadow work that's going to deal with those problems that's keeping you locked into that anxiety, that depression, that PTSD, whatever it is,
yeah,
go take some Aya and go meet Mother Aya and watch what she's going to do to you. She's going to grab a hold of you and she's going to take you down that void, and she's going to, it's going to be rough. I won't candy coat it at
for many
all.
people.
And but when you come out on the other side, all that is going to be so worth it.
It always is. There are quite a few people I've taken through ceremony that went through smooth as silk, and hey man, everything all right? And they were like, beautiful. And I'd sit down, I'd talk with everybody, and so anything we need to talk about, and they said that was absolutely beautiful. They didn't have no PTSD, anxiety. They had no life issues, nothing, and they went through smooth as silk. And I thought, well, it wasn't that way for me. I'll tell you that much. But whoa,
I
I
mean,
got to do that again. So get that around my head once. But they went through just smooth as silk, And like I tell people, remember where I went to, this isn't real public knowledge, but they start them people there between 9 and 12 years old, men and girls.
right.
Children.
It's an initiation
Children, yeah.
process.
Sure, you're
It's a
going to be a
right.
man.
It's a rite of
You
passage.
sure are. Yep, and they start them in these learning experiences very early in age, and they handle it quite well. But there again, the shaman also know their plant, as I was trained, so they get, of course, a smaller dose. They're not having a 40 milliliter
Right.
shot glass. They're having, a 10 milliliter. So, but they're still introduced to it, and trust me, I'm sure that mother's quite relevant at that young age also. So, and the the LD50 on ayahuasca dimethyltryptamine is it's just an ungodly amount. It's almost not even it's almost not even consumable. The amount they're talking about that has an LD50 to it. So virtually there is none. And for people that don't know, that's lethal dose by 50%. And when they had tested it in lab rats for the LD50, there was an extreme amount. So the ayahuasca, now I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody it's safe. Use a good shaman, as we already talked about in the last show. Know where you're going with it, and there's precautions to take with it, obviously.
Right.
I got a pretty darn good track record myself, but I'm not here promoting my website either. I'm here talking about consciousness and how we get there and how people in my church get there and how we help people. Of course, you have to join and donate to the church to have a membership, but then you're allowed them monthly sacraments. And I take great care and put much love and energy into everything I do with that, and my people also know that. But back to that consciousness part, that is something that each one of the people in my church all seek themselves also in the same way that I do. We also know that the only way to get to that consciousness that we need is with ayahuasca, which is our right in our Constitution. And many other laws protect us of them rights. Have you do it the proper way.
Exactly.
So keeping these people consciousness and giving them this consciousness or subconscious that they look to strive for, the way that we do it in churches with sacraments. But that little place of consciousness, that there's so much work being done. And what people need to really think about is during your sleep is when most of the work is really being done. And really to get that book by Dr. Robert Murphy, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, it's really a good book, and it has some very good teachings in it on how to work with your mind, how to relax your body to get yourself into that meditative state for manifestation. Finding them lost keys you might be looking for. But Dr. Robert Murphy explains it pretty well, and it's a lot of my early studies with the subconscious and the consciousness, and why I have went to different countries, and not just sat in ceremony. I learned to be the shaman because I wanted to know everything I could learn with the plant medicine from the teachers that were in the village. And it was just a path that I took through my life, and here I am, 20, 30 years later, doing a podcast. Heck, I didn't know what this was even 30 years ago. They didn't even have that word yet, did they?
I don't think podcasts existed 30 years ago. I think
No.
they're quite a bit newer.
Yeah, yeah. So
But I mean,
I'm delighted to be here,
20, 30
and
years
on a
ago, we would
podcast.
have been sitting around a drum circle talking about this.
Exactly, and that's what we did all the years up until now, and we still sit in our drum circle and build our fire, unless we're indoors, of course, because we have a chapel we work out of local, and during the cold and rainy season, we're indoors. But no matter where you are, that level of consciousness can and will be obtained.
Oh, absolutely.
In my ceremonies, they are anyways, and I take a lot of pride and care in it also. Everything from start to finish. A lot goes on inside my head that nobody knows about in this conscious, subconscious part throughout the whole ceremony.
Well,
So,
and that even goes back to the way shamans worked in the past before the I don't want to necessarily use the term neo shamanism or modern shamanism, but there was a point in time where the medicine wasn't given to the patient. The plant medicine
right, the
wasn't given
shaman
to the
did.
patient. The
Hmm.
shaman took it, and the shaman traveled because they were trained in how to work with their consciousness to travel and go seek what that person needed, and they would partake on the things that needed to be done on the spiritual realms.
Yeah. And that's why during ceremony, I also partake in ceremony myself. I've worked with it enough to where I might have an hour or so that where I'm going to have to sit with myself uh, for that amount of time, but I'm up pretty quick to start working with everybody else soon after that. Um, but there again, that takes practice, and I like the more modern way about it because I thought, why should I be the only one gifted to see all this when actually so much work can be done and the people need to
Oh,
see this.
I wholly agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that
The
too.
shaman
And
back then were being stingy. They wanted to keep it all for themselves. Yeah, I know what they were doing. Sure.
hey, it kept them being the important one in
Yeah.
the tribe.
Yeah. Yeah, it
But I
did.
mean,
And
but things were also a little different in the way that things were dealt with back then too. And
yeah.
but yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that giving the people that are coming in the sacraments and allowing them to see what the shaman sees, to see this other side, to see these different realms, to step into the spiritual world, and to be able to access that knowledge, that communion with the spirit guides, and everything else that happens when you're over there, and that bringing that back, that knowledge, that wisdom, that experience really affects your consciousness from day to day, even days, weeks, months, years after your first ceremony.
Oh, it's life changing. Sure.
Yeah.
I've never seen nobody come out and be a worse person ever. Everybody's came out and been some kind or a little bit better of a person, if not totally changed to a better person. And I do mean everybody. There was some
Yeah.
way that it impacted them, that it made them a better person in some way. Now, it might not have made the bank robber quit robbing banks, you know, but I bet he gave more of the money away that he robbed, if that's one way to think about it. And, back to that conscious and subconscious, this is where old karma comes in too now. And now, how does she weigh in on our conscious, subconscious? I ain't got that one figured out yet, but I can guarantee that there's definitely a factor out there throughout this whole existence of all of this consciousness hooked together that there's a force out there that will, it seems to me that that part of the consciousness force, it's like they're the sergeant of arms in that realm, and whatever was wrong they're going to straighten out, and it may be not so good on the person that caused the karma in the first place. And I got a whole book of stuff that during the ceremonies I try to take a little time to gather a little piece of information or something that I can come back with and use in life or to help anybody in our church and anybody that wants to even know anything about this, we're all open arms. Um, but that the consciousness part, we get into that, and then we get into what happens to the conscious when the old meat suit gives out, and it starts to we initially die. Well, now that consciousness, that has been highly debated for thousands of years also. But I'll tell you what, after hundreds of ceremonies I've been in, I got a pretty good idea. And I really don't elaborate on it much, but it's something that anybody else could go take a look at. You just have to put in the time like I did, that's all, to go seek it for yourself. And I'll guide the people there. I truly will.
Yeah, I mean, I've got similar experiences probably that you're talking about. I imagine if we'd sit down and compare experiences on what we perceive as far as what happens after this physical form is done.
Yeah.
And being in those other states and seeing certain things and being there, doing certain work. I had a guest on who was a death doula, and that was one of the things that she worked on with plant medicines as well, is working on helping people realize what comes after, so they don't fear it, so that they're not scared in those final moments.
Yeah, I did that to a gentleman that 82 years old, and 2 weeks later he passed. But the 2 weeks prior to that, I altered his consciousness, and when he got his feet back on the ground, he had a nice talk with me and said that was the most beautiful thing that he'd seen in his life. And then a couple of weeks later he passed on, but me and him had talked about it, and it worked out very well for us. And he was a really good guy. I miss him. His name was Wayne, and at 82 years old, it was time he had led a good life. And he's moved on to that other state of consciousness that he got to see before he left, that I took him to.
Right.
But that consciousness, and I get back to karma, how that works through people. I think the consciousness and the way that it feels, and that's why it's so important for me to keep nurturing and growing the church, because I want a group of us that are strong, that can sit with me, and we can put our minds together, and through collective meditation and prayer, we're stronger. We're all heard. But when we're beating a bigger drum, we move up on the priority list. That's kind of the way I view it. So with a group of us healing each other through this altered state of consciousness, that's something that I'm working real hard with our group of people now, to get them all on the same page with me. And it does take time.
Well, what you're talking about there is coming together into what's known as the collective consciousness, or the cosmic consciousness, or you hear people refer to it as the Christ consciousness. Depending on what their different belief system is, there's several different words for it.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of coming together in one conscious state of mind, and it involves the fact of oneness, where we realize we're not as separated from each other as we think we are.
Correct. We're, by no means. And I think we're so well connected that I've noticed it with people that I've worked with, and I've noticed it with my fiancée, Tara. We've grown very close consciously, so she knows when I'm hungry, dinner's getting made. The phone rings, I was about to call, or vice versa. When them things happen a lot, what do you think, they're just all by chance? Luck? No. You're connected consciously. We all are.
Yep.
And me and her just happen to be really tight with consciousness. So many times I feel what she feels what I feel. And we're 500 miles apart at this moment. So
Absolutely.
the consciousness that, and there's some really good experiments the government did years back. Well, Germany did it, Hitler with the Vril, Vrill. They grew their hair like down to the floor, and they practiced a lot with consciousness and teleportation. And there's a study that U.S. government did where they seen how fast in time consciousness. And this goes back a long time ago, but they found that it worked the same no matter where at in the country that the other party was, underground, in the air. And that study just never really gained in popularity. Then about 2 years ago, the real study came out, and it's called, if nobody knows about it, I'm about to explain it to all of you. And it was called the double slit experiment. What that consists of, and I urge everybody to get your fingers working and YouTube the double slit experiment. And this proves consciousness and everything I've been talking about for 30 years. What they did is they took 2 plates and they cut slits in the plates. And they had an idea, if you took a gun and you shot marbles at the plates, the pattern on the back ball would be them 2 slits in that plate, because the marbles would hit, the edges get bounced off, the ones that make it through would make 2 slits on the very back paper. So then they thought they would do that with atoms. So they have a machine that shoots little atoms. So they shot these atoms at that same plate, and they had 2 slits of atoms pasted on the paper in the back. They did one thing to alter what I'm about to tell you, and it's consciousness. They looked at the device they had that shoots this matter, these atoms, towards this plate, and what had happened, just the mere fact of them watching consciousness changed the pattern. It wasn't no more 2 slits in the back, it was 4. And science, they got to do it, I think, 5 times repeatedly with the same way to make it stick, per se. So they did that experiment 5 times, whatever science, and now they have consciousness proves is real. The proof is there. So when they take away looking at them atoms, hitting that double slit, they went back to just 2 slits in the backboard. You look at it, consciousness, now you got 4. So if people want to look up the double slit experiment, I really urge you to. And that proves consciousness, by the way. And I've been talking about this for 30 years. That came out about 2 years ago, I think it was. So I've pointed a few people to that, but I urge people to Google that and watch the video on it, because that's what I've been talking about. Now science can prove consciousness. I thought that was pretty good there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And going back to some of the stuff that you was talking about with some of the experiences, the government even went back and was doing experiments with plant medicines and stuff, working with...
Oh, yeah, tryptamine.
Yeah. I mean...
Well, what do you think happened with Hitler? He didn't listen. He wasn't supposed to try to take Russia in the winter. He didn't listen. Remember, tryptamine can be used for good and bad.
Oh, yeah.
And Hitler was also very involved in the tryptamines in the 40s. Yeah. So there's bad people that's used it for bad reasons, and that's why you need good people like me.
And that's going to be out there with absolutely anything. As good as something can be and as powerful as it can be, to help people and be a blessing on mankind, there's going to be someone out there that's going to do the flip side and abuse it.
Yep. Yeah, and my job is keep that door open for the people that want the help, that want the spirituality, that want that altered consciousness. That's your right, by the way. Guaranteed by our Constitution, and that'll be another talk for another day before we get into a bunch of legal stuff. But, yeah, I know what my rights are, and I bring my rights to my people in the church, and we stand together. But that altering consciousness, it's been done for a very long time, and it's been done for a reason. Now, there's other things that I'm starting to find in some very old texts that I've been coming across, and it's with monoatomic subparticles and nutrients. And we'll also have to have another show about that as I progress with these studies. But this is something that's going to be added to my way of life. And this will also change the vibrational stance of a person. But there again, I need to study more, and I need to keep working the way that I am, keep praying, and get the answers that I need to finish what I'm working on.
I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Oh boy, that one's gonna be heavy. Whew.
Hey, I'm not afraid of the heavy conversations,
And
okay?
it's gonna roll into the Anunnaki too, so I'm kind of saving that, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, because
Yeah.
actually, let me just bring that up since you mentioned Anunnaki. On June 24th, we're gonna have Michael Lee Hill on, and I have asked Gene to come in as a guest host that night with me. Gene is really into the Anunnaki. Michael Lee Hill is an expert on the Anunnaki. He's done a lot of writings and a lot of research and has a lot of insight to the Anunnaki. And honestly, that night, I think I may just start off the show, kick back, and then let you two go.
Yeah, that'd be all right, no problem. I've never hosted, but nothing but ceremonies, so this will be different for me, I guess.
It's just a conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, no,
and these
it's
are good, deep conversations too. Uh, and I hope some people are getting the message that are out there struggling, and they're not getting relief from the doctors with PTSD and anxiety, depression, and I really hope that they look deeper into what we're doing, because like I said, we're going to the subconscious to fix these things.
right. Well,
And
one of the
the
things
doctors aren't. We
one
are.
of the things that the medical field does not address is, they'll look at the physical body, they'll touch on the mental aspects some and the emotional aspects of health and healing some, because we're seeing more and more on mental health, but there's still a stigma around mental health, and a lot of,
Unfortunately, yes.
it's this kind of, you'll hear people say that, oh, psychology is a pseudoscience or it's a soft science because there's no,
Well,
you'll hear that. But the one thing that you
yeah.
do not see medical professionals addressing is the spiritual health.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And there's a lot of times that spiritual health is where the problem truly is at. And that's where things like, a shaman can come in, or, a pastor or a preacher who is really in tune with things to work with someone that is a spiritual leader that is there to really work with someone on that deeper level to help heal some of those hurts that are
Yeah.
on a spiritual level.
hmm Well, there's one thing about the ayahuasca that I do know. If it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, and that's the target, then that's the target. If it's spirituality, I've seen more than one atheist come back on their knees knowing the Creator. So I let Mother take over there, but I will kick that door open. And you will get what you need. People, that part of that consciousness, or is it the subconscious that controls that? That's also debatable. But I have a stronger belief, and being I've been a lot deeper than many, many people, there's more happening than what meets the eye, and even in the realms that I go to. And I just urge people who are ready. Well, I don't even like the word, are you ready? If you think nobody's ever ready. I mean, we've already talked about that before.
You
I
may
mean,
think
you're just fooling yourself.
you may think you're ready, but then after you drink that tea, you realize.
Was I ready? But if you wait till you're ready, you'll never be ready.
No.
So, people will dance around that, oh, I'm not ready, not ready, not ready. Well, you never will be until you just do it. And that's part of what's also special about this, because this also psychologically, when you tell a person, you know, for 3 hours, I'm going to twist and turn you in directions you ain't never thought possible. I want to show you things in your mind that you don't even know that's hurting you. And they look at that and that, oh, how terrifying that might be, how healing it might be to get that out finally. But it's not out in the open for everybody. It's out in the open in your own mind. It's out in front of you to where you can finally heal from it. Now, I'm going to tell you about this part with me and as a shaman. Now, if you've been through some bad things in life and I see you struggling with it in ceremony, I always step in with my mind and I feel what you feel. And I absorb as much of that as I possibly can to help. And that's why it's so important for me to purge. So that's what I'm doing in my subconscious, conscious moments during the ceremony. I wish it was as easy as just sitting back and taking a roller coaster ride, but it's not. So I go through a lot of what that person goes through. Even though I might not exactly see what happened to them, I feel that part of what happened to them, which is sometimes pretty horrific. It really sucks. And, it gives them the relief, and it also gives them the power to get that behind them and move on in life in ways like they never thought possible. That's why I say on my business card, 10 years therapy in one night, because I'm not kidding either.
It really is.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to dog out psychologists and, pill pushers and that, but, and I understand they have to, because we got a lot of people that are in need of it. And I urge people to see a doctor and get that medication they need. But don't never think about not seeking out other ways and methods. And I understand why the churches and, the retreats don't like doing people that are bipolar and with issues. They don't want the liability. They don't want to take the time to help cure the person. That's the problem. I will. Everybody needs a shot. So I'm willing to give them people a shot. So what the retreats won't do, I will, to help them people. But they also have to trust me and follow orders just like going to the doctor. And I've had some success with this quite a bit of success over the years with it. And mostly it's getting the people to hang in. There's people that get on antidepressants and don't take them every day.
Right.
So that's also an issue. And there again, that's that part of the consciousness that all these issues arise from. Well, conscious, subconscious.
We might have even touched on it in the last show. You can sit down, you can drink this tea, you can have this experience. But if you don't